Okay, imagine this. Telling your child, you're so smart. Something that feels so positive, right? Could actually be holding them back.
Yeah, it really sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Totally. Today, we're looking at some really fascinating child development research that kind of flips some common parenting ideas on their head.
We are. We're digging into the book NurtureShock by
Ah.
Bronson and Merryman. It really challenges a lot of conventional wisdom. And just before we jump in, we really want to encourage you to check out Mindful Moments over on our YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah.
It uses AI to analyze books like this one, helps spark your own thinking on these, really important topics.
Definitely worth checking out. Okay, so this idea about praise, telling kids they're smart, backfiring, that's a big one. We've been told for ages that boosting confidence like that is key. So what's the actual research say?
Well, Carol Dweck's work is really central here. She found that praising intelligence, that inherent quality, can actually make kids afraid of challenges.
Afraid. Why?
Because if they struggle, they might think, oh, maybe I'm not actually smart. So they might avoid things where they could potentially fail or not look smart.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you're smart isn't the way to go, what should we be saying?
Dweck's research points strongly towards praising effort and persistence. So things like, wow, I really like how you kept working on that puzzle, even when it got tricky.
Well,
Or, you really focused hard to figure that out. It shifts the focus to the process, something they can actually control.
Right, right. Because effort is a choice they make. I remember the book mentioning a teacher. She really tried to praise effort at school, but then found herself slipping back into the old "you're smart" habit at home. It's just so ingrained.
It really is. And the book also talks about being specific with praise, not just good job,
Yeah.
but pointing out exactly what they did well. Like, I saw how carefully you listened to the instructions that time. Or maybe for sports, that was a great pass. You really saw where your teammate was.
Ah, okay. So they know what to repeat next time.
Exactly. Gives them concrete strategies.
And wasn't there a study at a school, life sciences secondary school? They taught kids that the brain is like a muscle.
Yes, that was powerful.
Yeah.
They taught students that intelligence isn't fixed, that you can develop it, and the result,
What happened?
their math scores actually improved significantly. And it wasn't because they learned more math facts. It was because their mindset about learning changed, that core belief that they could get smarter.
Wow. That really challenges that whole self-esteem movement idea, doesn't it? The idea that just pumping up self-esteem automatically leads to success.
It does. The book mentions Roy Baumeister's work reviewing that.
Yeah.
And, well, the link between high self-esteem and, say, better grades isn't as direct as people thought. It's more complex.
And the book even suggested some downsides to too much praise, like kids getting overly competitive.
Yeah, or focused on just looking good, maintaining that image of being successful all the time. If you're always told you're great, you might be less willing to try something hard where you might stumble. It connects a bit to Cloninger's research with animals, actually. Intermittent reinforcement.
Oh, yeah, the rats and mice.
Right. Learning to push through frustration, not getting a reward every single time. That actually builds persistence, resilience. It's not about making everything easy.
So learning to struggle a bit is actually good.
In a supportive context, yes. It builds coping skills.
I liked the personal example in the book, too, about shifting praise,
Yeah.
focusing on concentration or listening well, or making a good pass in soccer. Real effort things.
Yes, because those are actionable. Kids hear that and think, okay, concentrating helps, listening carefully helps, I can do those things. It gives them a practical toolkit.
And that final point about praise was quite profound, that not constantly saying you're smart actually gives them the space to figure out their own abilities.
Precisely. It allows for a more, grounded internal sense of competence rather than relying on external validation that might not always be accurate.
Okay, let's shift gears. Sleep. Another huge topic the book dives into. And it's pretty shocking. Kids today get about an hour less sleep than kids did 30 years ago.
It is shocking. And we worry so much about baby sleep, but then it seems to fall off the radar as kids get older.
Right. Why is that happening? Less sleep.
Well, the book points to a few things. Overscheduling, homework loads, definitely technology screens keeping brains wired, and sometimes parents may be being reluctant to enforce strict bedtimes.
Yeah, the bedtime battles. But the impact. The book stresses that kids' brains are still developing way longer than we think, right? Like into their early 20s.
Exactly. Well into their early 20s. And sleep is critical for that development.
Yeah.
Sada's research, which you mentioned earlier, is stark. Just 1 hour of lost sleep.
That was the IQ drop, wasn't it?
Yes, a measurable drop in cognitive performance.
Oh, yeah.
Roughly 7 points on IQ tests. That's comparable to the effects of low-level lead exposure.
Wow. From just 1 hour less sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it links to school performance, too.
Absolutely. Consistently, across studies from elementary through high school, more sleep generally correlates with better grades. Less sleep impairs focus, learning, remembering things.
Because the brain is actually working during sleep, consolidating memories.
It's not just passive rest. Different sleep stages do different jobs. Slow-wave sleep seems crucial for locking in factual stuff. The hippocampus is really active processing memories, especially positive or neutral ones.
And sleep deprivation hits the hippocampus harder.
Seems that way, yes, which affects that memory consolidation.
And then they're teenagers, their sleep is a whole other challenge.
That's you.
Okay.
Mary Carskadon's work on this is key. She showed that during puberty, there's a natural phase shift.
Phase shift.
Yeah, their internal body clock shifts later. Melatonin, the sleep hormone, gets released later at night. So they genuinely aren't sleepy until later, and they naturally wake up later.
Which makes those super early high school start times just brutal.
Absolutely brutal. The book cites places like Edina, Minnesota, and Lexington, Kentucky that shifted start times later.
And saw positive results.
Big time. Improved SAT scores in Edina, better motivation, lower depression rates, and in Lexington, they even saw a drop in teenage car accidents. Fewer tired kids driving.
That's incredible. It really makes you question how we see teenagers, doesn't it? Is some of that moodiness or lack of focus actually just chronic exhaustion?
This is a really valid question. How much of typical teen behavior is actually amplified or even caused by widespread sleep deprivation? It's something to think about.
And there was a quick mention of a link to obesity, too.
Yes, sleep loss messes with hormones that regulate appetite and metabolism. So there's a physiological link to potential weight gain as well.
Okay, one more big area the book tackles, race, and how children understand it. This is complex stuff.
Very complex. And the insights are, again, maybe not what you'd expect, like how early kids notice racial differences.
How early?
Visually, between 3 and 6 months old. They can distinguish differences.
Wow, that young.
And Phyllis Katz's research showed that by age 3, white children often show a preference for playing with other white children. By 5 or 6, they're already using race to sort people into groups spontaneously.
So they notice it very early. But the book argues that just being around diversity, like in a diverse school, isn't enough to shape positive attitudes.
Right. That was a key finding from Brigitte Vittrups' research. She studied families using multicultural videos. Exposure alone didn't do much.
So what?
Direct conversation. Parents actually talking openly about race, about interracial friendships, that's what led to significant positive shifts in the kids' attitudes. Silence doesn't seem to work.
That's interesting. Because there's that debate, isn't there? Should you explicitly point out someone's race, like talking about President Obama? Or is it better to be colorblind and let kids learn by example?
It's a real point of discussion. Some worry that naming race reinforces categories. Others argue that not talking about it leaves kids to draw their own, potentially inaccurate conclusions and doesn't challenge existing biases. The book leans towards the importance of discussion.
And it explained why young children might stare longer at someone of a different race. It's not necessarily bias.
Often, no. It's partly about familiarity. We tend to pay less visual attention to faces that look like the ones we see all the time. A different race face is novel, visually interesting. Their brain is basically trying to figure out, what does this difference mean?
They're just processing information.
Exactly. Trying to make sense of their world.
The book also touched on school desegregation, saying just putting kids together isn't a magic bullet.
No. Gary Orfield's work highlights this. Without intentional effort and proper teacher training to foster positive interaction, kids can end up self-segregating even more within diverse schools. It requires active facilitation.
And that idea of contact theory, that just being around different groups reduces prejudice. It doesn't always work perfectly for race in U.S. schools.
The benefits seem more modest or inconsistent compared to how contact theory works with, say, attitudes towards disabled people or elderly people, or even in some international racial contexts. It's complicated in U.S. schools.
Why is that?
The book suggests a paradox. Kids in diverse schools do see some friendships across racial lines, but they also see much larger groups sticking to their own race.
So the overall pattern might send a stronger message.
Potentially. It can inadvertently reinforce the idea that grouping by race is the norm, maybe even lead to feelings of exclusion if you're in the minority.
And the numbers on actual close cross-race friendships, especially in high school, are quite low.
Yes, the statistics mentioned are pretty sobering, especially for white and black students having best friends across racial lines. It shows we still have a way to go in fostering those deep connections.
It's a reminder, too, that kids are trying to make rules out of what they see, and sometimes they get it wrong, make generalizations.
Oh, absolutely. They're little scientists trying to figure out social patterns, and sometimes that leads to awkward or inaccurate statements about race as they try to formulate rules based on limited observations.
But on a positive note, the book mentions the importance of ethnic pride for minority kids.
Yes, research by psychologists like Alfie Harris-Britt shows that messages promoting ethnic pride are really beneficial. They boost self-confidence, school engagement for minority children. It's protective.
That makes sense. And there was even that fascinating study in Detroit about skin tone within a racial group.
Right, showing that even nuances like skin tone can play into social dynamics and outcomes, like the finding about darker-skinned black boys having higher GPAs in that specific context. It just highlights how incredibly complex identity and social perception are.
Wow. Okay, this book really packs a punch. So many things to think about: how we praise, the vital role of sleep, the nuances of race. We really hope this conversation has given you some food for thought.
Mm-hmm. And remember, for more AI-powered analysis and deeper dives into books like NurtureShock, check out Mindful Moments on our YouTube channel and explore our other podcasts, too.
Lots of great stuff there.
So as you reflect on all this, maybe ask yourself, what's one belief you held about kids, maybe a really common one, that you might look at differently now?
That's a great question to sit with. We really encourage you to subscribe to our podcasts if you haven't already. Share this conversation with others, parents, educators, anyone interested in child development.
Yeah, spread the word.
And if you want to read NurtureShock yourself, you can find a link to purchase it in our show notes. But most importantly, just keep thinking critically, keep questioning as you navigate the amazing, complex world of raising and understanding children.